Wasn't invited to a wedding, so I hooked up with the bride's sister. Jim and I were in the office today. He came to me and asked if we could talk. He asked if we could clear the air over some beers with his wife after work. I said okay. After work I meet Jim and his wife Pam at a bar. They both apologized for not inviting me, and making me feel excluded. Jim apologized for lying and getting mad about it. The reason they didn't invite me is because they didn't want single guys at the wedding. They went to a big wedding back in 2019 that was ruined when a bunch of intoxicated single guys started hitting on the women there. A few of the boyfriends and husbands got mad and it turned into a big fight. People were arrested and it completely ruined the wedding. I found it hard to believe, but they showed me a couple of Facebook videos of them at a wedding, and it looked the damn Royal Rumble going on. I was even shown a few Facebook statuses confirming their story. Pam said she was sort of traumatized by this and swore they'd have no single guys at their wedding. Well, the wedding came and Pam stuck to her guns. Only family, couples, single women or trusted single men were to be invited. Pam said that there were only about 10 single guys there, and they were all family members or groomsmen. She said the party turned out amazing this way since women didn't have to worry about being hit on. Pam said it truly wasn't personal, and that she's so sorry for not inviting me, but would do it again. I asked if she and Jim didn't trust me enough to control myself. She said that Jim vouched hard for me, but she was sticking to her guns. The compromise was that she'd have to explain it if anyone asked, and that Jim got to choose the honeymoon destination. Curiously, she said that she had a sister around my age and I was just her type and she wanted to keep her away from me. I was a little offended at that, but she says that it's for my own good. Penny said her sister is a little bit of a slut and she didn't want her to get her hooks in me. Jim said he should have handled it better, and he wanted to be honest but it wouldn't have made much of a difference so he hoped I wouldn't mind as much. Plus he figured I wouldn't want to go to a wedding as a single guy anyway. I told them I was kinda hurt, they thought I would act like a creeper at their wedding. Pam assured me that she thought I was a nice, smart, funny guy but she just wanted to make sure their wedding went off without a hitch. They promised to make it up to me, but I told them it wasn't necessary. Pam insisted on it, and said I had to know how sorry she was. So we made plans to have dinner at their expense at a very nice restaurant in the city this weekend. I still feel kind of insulted, but I may get a free dinner out of it. I had a call an hour ago with my project manager and explained the entire situation. She advised me to go to HR and make a complaint since it could lead to a hostile work environment. I have a meeting with them Monday. I don't really want to make a formal complaint, just have it on file in case anything happens. I don't think it will since Jim doesn't seem like that kind of person, but I've been wrong plenty of times before. So as per the advice here, I won't be going to dinner with Jim and Pam. I will however insist on a public apology that doesn't imply that I'm a creep. And I'm insisting on some fresh apple cider donuts, not store-bought, but fresh. I called Jim on his work phone to explain my change of heart. He was disappointed, but understood my reasoning. I parroted some of the talking points and he said he understood. He wouldn't make a big deal out of it, and we could just move on. I thanked him for being cool about it, and he hung up. I thought that would be the end of it, but not 5 minutes later Jim called me back. I groan and pick up. Surprisingly, it was Pam on the other side. She didn't come at me hostile, but she did sound upset. She wanted to know why I didn't want to come anymore. I explained what I told Jim about how they basically insisted I was a creep. I told her I didn't want to invalidate her experiences, but I didn't have to accept being told I'm a potential monster. She said that she didn't mean it like that, and that she thinks I'm a good person, but couldn't risk it for her wedding. She was practically begging me to meet her in person to clear the air further. She kept on saying that we could be the best of friends if I'd give her a chance to explain better. I said no thanks, and that I had to go, but I'm sorry that she went through what she went through. I ended the call by saying, I didn't even get those donuts. I then hung up. They swung low so I swung lower. It's been quiet since then, but Jim is back in the office on Monday and I fear Pam might do something drastic. I declined their dinner offer and left it at that, hoping that would be the end of it. It wasn't. And now, this silly drama continues. I went in 2 hours early on Monday so that I could potentially avoid a Jim after work chat. Surprisingly, Jim came in an hour early, lining him up to potentially leave with me. Jim looked exhausted. And I don't mean tired, I mean mentally. I've seen Jim tired, we've worked many late nights on projects together. I've seen him hungover, this wasn't any of that. I almost can't describe it, he looked worn down. He shot me a sup nod, and I gave him one back, and we got to work. I kept my meeting with HR. Our HR rep is a wonderful lady named Sally. I told Sally the whole story, and she said that in her 15 years of HR work, she's never heard a more stupid story. We shared a good laugh, and she told me that it would be unofficially logged just in case Jim or Pam did anything crazy. She told me she thinks Jim is harmless, but to keep my eyes sharp. The rest of the day was uneventful. The most interesting thing that happened was that I saw Jim's face buried in his hands for a good minute or so. With 2 hours to go, I go to the break room for some water. Jim follows me in and approaches cautiously. I gave him a surprised look, and he just threw up his hands as if to say he was not hostile. He said he knows I'm the last person I want to talk to right now, but he needs to talk to me. I said fine, but I angled us over to where the security camera was. Paraphrasing here, but he said, look, I won't ever speak to you again if you don't want me to, but let me buy you around and explain all of the things Pam didn't tell you when we met the other day. Jim sounded desperate, something I'd never seen from him before. He then hit me with the money quote, look man, I could really use a friend right now, and I've always considered you a friend. Well, sorry to disappoint everyone here, but I'm a big gullible softy. I agreed to talk with him, but I told him that there would be absolutely no more meetings on this situation after this. He agreed and said he'd meet me after work. After work, we walked to our usual bar, the same one I met him and Pam the first time. I suspected Pam might be there, but she wasn't. Nevertheless, I kept my eye open for her. Once we sat down, Jim apologized yet again. This one seemed even more genuine than the first. I told him he didn't need to keep apologizing. I got it the first time. He said that he had to apologize because there's a lot more to the story about the wedding than I thought. Jim explained that he fought Pam like hell to get her to give up the single men's exclusion, but she was dead set on it. They argued for months, and a lot of people offered different solutions. Jim suggested a smaller wedding with only immediate family and friends, but Pam shot that down. She always dreamt of a big wedding with lots of people there, and a small wedding didn't fit her dream. Her parents said, "Why not hire a security guard?" Pam said that she wanted the possibility eliminated completely. She said that a few single men could stand to not be invited to a party for once in their lives. Jim said he had a lot of friends who wanted to come and that they would be hurt if they weren't invited. Pam said she was making sacrifices too, a lot of her guy friends wanted to come. Jim finally relented and said if the exclusion were to happen, he wanted nothing to do with that decision and wanted it known that it was out of his hands. Pam said she'd take the heat for it if it came to that, but didn't think people would go crazy over it. She also gave Jim the choice of their honeymoon destination since he was making a big sacrifice. They went to the Namibia if anyone is curious. Jim said the wedding, reception, and party were amazing. He said that so many women there were intoxicated off their faces and falling over themselves. Apparently, they did feel safe, but an intoxicated vocal minority was complaining about the lack of hot guys to dance with. Jim even laughed because one of them was going around calling it a lesbian wedding since there were only women there. Oh, and some women were absolutely hitting on the handful of single guys there, but Pam didn't mind that as much. Jim said he wasn't rubbing it in, just setting up a point. After the honeymoon, they came home to what Jim described as a PR firestorm. Apparently, Pam had lied to her guy friends about why they weren't invited. One of her close friends let slip the real reason they weren't invited. They were effing furious. She was flooded with angry calls and messages from her friends about Pam essentially calling them potential creeps. Pam explained her position multiple times to her friends, but it fell on deaf ears. She has lost many friends over this. One of the guys said, "If you think that I'm a creep then why are we even friends?" Pam has been crying for days, and her work life has become terrible. She might even need to leave her job. By this point, Jim had a few hard drinks and was tipsy, so he let loose a little more. He said that her decision had cost him friends of his own. So many of his guy friends were furious to learn they were excluded, and for the reason why. On the day of the wedding, about 6 or so of his closest friends who were excluded decided to go on a fishing trip as a screw you to Jim and Pam. The cherry on top of the petty cake? They decide to donate $500 and some items to a local woman's shelter. Jim was devastated, and none of those guys are returning his calls or messages. Even their families are upset with them over the exclusion. Pam's parents are publicly supportive, but berate her behind the scenes. She doesn't have anyone but her bridesmaids and about 3 other friends who believe in her cause. Jim said at one point that Pam was hysterical. And screaming, "Why can't anyone just understand my point of view?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but there was more to this crazy story. At this point, we were about an hour in and Jim was nice and tipsy. So, I pried for more information. Jim said that at first, Pam was sticking to her guns that the exclusion was a good idea, but she was starting to waver a little bit. She said that most people understood where she was coming from, but that it was too heavy-handed, and even a little misogynistic. Jim and Pam have had multiple blow-ups over this whole situation, and they're not in a good place right now. He said that instead of feeling giddy about his new wife and basking in the glow of being married, he's harboring a ton of resentment towards her because she's cost him a lot of his friends and ruined their lives over a stupid party. As for me? Apparently, Pam really likes me. One of her biggest regrets about this entire situation is not getting to know me better before the wedding. He said that Pam thinks I'm one of the coolest people she's ever met. I asked Jim how she made that determination from a 15-minute chat, and he laughed and said, "I don't know man, she probably has a crush on you or something." I laughed, but that made the situation a little bit weird. As for Pam's sister? She is a slut, but not in the way you may think. Jim explained that Pam's sister Penny is by all accounts a very smart, successful, respectful woman. She just so happens to like intimacy. Jim explained that Penny is really into the same scene and is into things like ethical non-monogamy. She frequently mentions her adventures to Jim and Pam, and it got them into the lifestyle as well. I was a little surprised, and I asked for clarification, and he said yeah, she kind of got us into some of that stuff. I was shocked. I mean, how often do you hear that your coworker is into that sort of stuff? But hey, no shaming from me. So, it turns out that Penny isn't some soul-sucking, home-wrecking, out-of-control succubus. She's just a regular woman who loves intimacy. Jim said that Pam was scared that we would hit it off. We share many of the same interests and have similar personality types according to Jim. Pam wasn't lying about that, nor that I was exactly her type. She likes tall guys, and from what I've heard, she'd have been all over me if she found out I was single. Well, now I was curious, so I asked Jim if he had a picture. He pulled up her Instagram, and I must say she was drop-dead damn gorgeous. She looked like Pam's twin, only she was a little bit skinnier. I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty pissed at Pam all over again. Jim said that Pam has always been a little jealous of Penny. I don't know why. Pam is a stunner herself, and looks just like Penny. Jim said that as a screw you to Pam, he'd give her my Insta so we can DM each other, and he'd put in a good word for me. I thanked him profusely. He said that Pam was so desperate to make amends with me because I made a big impression on her, and she thinks that we'd be really good friends if we hung out. Jim said that she was just grasping at straws at this point. She's lost all of her friends, and she wanted to make another one. He said that he'd rein Pam in so that she wouldn't bother me anymore. By this point, Jim is more than tipsy. He says that he's having doubts about this marriage because the wedding process and aftermath have been a nightmare. He thinks it'd be really shallow to divorce her over this, but his life has been ruined by her choices. I was shocked, and he said don't tell Pam please. I swore that I wouldn't tell her anything. Jim paid for our drinks, and he was going to take public transportation home, but I told him he needs an Uber. He fought me on that, but I insisted and he agreed to take one. I put him in the Uber and sent him on his way. An hour later, Pam texted me from his work phone. She told me, "Thank you for taking care of my hubby, you're a good person." I didn't respond. And that brings us to now. I hope that this is mostly the end of it, but it seems like Pam might be desperate and do something rash. Jim was true to his word and gave Penny my Instagram. She messaged me last week and we got to talking. The conversation went so well that we agreed on a coffee date this past weekend. Well, sorry to disappoint the naysayers here, but the date went extremely well. We talked about a lot, our hobbies, interests, futures, jobs, and families. Jim was right, we are remarkably similar, even down to some of our specific food tastes. The date went so well that we met at a bar next to her office for some after-work drinks. And yes, that date went amazing as well. Now here's the part I think you're all going to like. We're going to do a hike this coming weekend, and along the way, we're going to make a stop at the winery where Jim and Pam had their wedding and pick me up some goddamn apple cider donuts. I think if all goes well with this date, I'm going to ask her to be my girlfriend. She just feels special. I'm absolutely smitten with this girl. Well, we had a hike this past Saturday and it was beyond amazing. The weather was perfect, the foliage was beautiful, and the view from the top of the mountain was amazing. We had a picnic at the top of the mountain, and during a lull in the conversation, I summoned all of my courage and asked her if she'd like to be my girlfriend. I was waiting for a more opportune time, but I guess I just got swept up in the moment in view. She smiled, laughed and said I was the corniest person alive for asking in such a cliché place, but she said that she loved corny and cliché. She said yes, and we sealed it with a kiss. On our way back, we finally stopped by the winery where Jim and Pam had their wedding and man it really was beautiful. It had panoramic views of the mountains, and the vineyard was very pretty. But I wasn't here for the view, I was here for some goddamn apple cider donuts. Funny enough, we got there kinda late and almost missed the fresh donuts for the day. Thankfully we got some of the last batches. God, those donuts were absolutely delicious. We got 2 dozen each and even got some apple filling cider donuts. The wait was worth it. Afterward we went back to her apartment and made dinner together. I've never had such an amazing date with a woman. It was just perfect. I didn't want to leave, but I couldn't be presumptuous. When I picked up my keys to go, she grabbed them from me and said, and I quote, "If you seriously think you're leaving, then you're out of your mind." I must have had the biggest smile on my face. So we spent the rest of the weekend together. We had a wonderful Sunday brunch, a nice walk around our city holding hands going into stores and sightseeing, and incredible intimacy. Unfortunately for me, we had to part last night because we had work in the morning. I was damn near in tears. This is going to sound dramatic as hell, but I've spent the last few hours at work being totally miserable that I'm not with Penny. It's like when you're in high school and you get your first boyfriend and you can't stand to be apart from each other. But you don't want sappy love stories, you're here for the drama. Well, me and Penny made it Instagram official on Sunday, and apparently Pam saw it on her sister's profile. She texted Penny on Sunday night, "How do you know him?" She said, "Jim introduced us." Pam only replied with, "I knew this would happen." We figured that might mean trouble down the road, but we don't care, Pam can be as mad as she wants. This morning, I actually went up to Jim and thanked him for introducing me to Penny. He explained that he and Pam had a huge fight over him introducing us. He said he didn't care about it though, it was worth it just to get us together and was a big screw you to Pam. I told him I'd buy him around as a thank you, but he said don't worry about it, and that it was the least he could do. Pam seems pretty upset with us being together. Either way, I'm just so happy. With Penny, she's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of person.